My son-in-law called me useless at dinner. The restaurant manager froze when I paid the bill. Before we continue, subscribe and comment your country or city below, backhand index pointing down. Let's see how far this powerful story travels. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror and sighed. The gray wool sweater I was wearing had a small hole near the cuff, and my trousers were a bit faded at the knees. I looked like exactly what I was, a 70-year-old man living a quiet, simple life. But looks can be very deceiving. Tonight was special, or at least, it was supposed to be. My daughter, Emily, had invited me to dinner for her 30th birthday. I hadn't seen her in 3 months, not since she married Greg. Just thinking about Greg made my stomach turn a little. He was a man who cared more about the brand of his watch than the time of day. I debated changing into something nicer. I had a closet full of Italian suits in the back room, wrapped in plastic, leftovers from a life I had left behind years ago. But I decided against it. I wanted to be comfortable. More importantly, I wanted to see if Greg had changed. The last time we spoke, he had made a snide comment about my fixed income and how I needed to be careful with my heating bill. He didn't know the truth about me. He didn't know that my fixed income was a choice, not a necessity. I grabbed my old, worn-out coat, the one with the fraying collar, and stepped out into the chilly autumn evening. The wind bit at my face, but I felt a strange sense of calm. I had a feeling tonight was going to be interesting. The restaurant Greg had chosen was called Obsidian. It was the kind of place where they didn't put prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. I took a cab there, and when I pulled up, the valet looked at my taxi with disdain. He was used to parking Ferraris and Bentleys, not yellow sedans with dented bumpers. I stepped out, buttoning my old coat against the wind. The valet didn't even offer to open the door for me. He just stood there, looking past me, waiting for a better tip to arrive on 4 wheels. I walked toward the entrance, the golden light spilling out onto the pavement. Through the glass doors, I could see the interior. It was all dark wood, velvet curtains, and crystal chandeliers. It reeked of money. I knew this place well. In fact, I knew it better than anyone, though I hadn't stepped foot inside in over a year. I took a deep breath and pushed the heavy oak door open. The warm air hit me, smelling of truffle oil and expensive perfume. The hostess, a young woman with a tight bun and a tighter smile, looked up from her podium. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second when she saw my coat. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone suggesting that I was probably lost and looking for a bus stop. "I'm here to meet the Miller party," I said, keeping my voice steady. The hostess checked her list, her manicured finger tracing down the names. "Yes, Mr. Greg Miller. Table 4. They are already seated." She didn't offer to take my coat. I didn't ask her to. I kept it on, feeling like armor. She led me through the dining room. It was crowded with the city's elite, politicians, bankers, socialites. I kept my head down, not wanting to be recognized just yet. We approached a round table near the window. Emily was there, looking radiant in a blue dress, but her eyes looked tired. Greg was sitting next to her, leaning back in his chair, swirling a glass of amber liquid. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car. When he saw me, he didn't stand up. He just smirked. "Well, look who made it," Greg said, his voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "We were worried you might have gotten lost on the subway, Arthur." Emily shot him a warning look. "Hi, Dad," she said, standing up to kiss my cheek. "I'm so glad you came." I hugged her tight. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I whispered. I pulled out my own chair and sat down. The chair was soft velvet, but the atmosphere at the table was hard as stone. "So, Arthur," Greg started before I had even settled in, "how's the retirement village? Exciting stuff happening at the bingo hall?" He chuckled at his own joke. I adjusted my napkin on my lap. "It's quiet, Greg. Just how I like it. And it's not a retirement village. It's just a small house." Greg waved his hand dismissively. "Same difference. Small house, small life." He took a sip of his drink. "This is a 30-year-old scotch, by the way. Cost $50 a glass. You should try it, but I know it's a bit out of your budget." I looked at the water glass in front of me. "I'm fine with water, thank you." Greg shook his head, a look of mock pity on his face. Suit yourself. I just thought you might want to taste the good life for once. Since you're here. He gestured around the restaurant. This place is exclusive. Took me 3 weeks to get a reservation. You have to know people. I suppressed a smile. I knew people. I knew the architect who designed the crown molding. I knew the chef who created the menu. But I stayed silent. It's a lovely place, I said simply. Very elegant. Greg snorted. Elegant? It's the best in the city. But you wouldn't know about that, would you? You haven't been to a real restaurant in decades. A waiter appeared at our table. He was tall, thin, and looked terrified of making a mistake. He held the menus in his hands like they were holy texts. Good evening, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Here are the menus. He handed one to Emily, one to Greg, and one to me. Greg snatched his open immediately. I already know what I want, Greg announced. But I'll let you guys look. I opened the heavy leather-bound folder. The prices were indeed high. A steak was $80. A salad was $20. I felt the waiter's eyes on me. I looked up and saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze. He stared at me, then at my coat, then back at my face. His eyes widened. I gave him a very subtle, almost imperceptible shake of my head. Don't say anything, my eyes pleaded. The waiter blinked, swallowed hard, and looked down at his notepad. He understood. He was a professional. I'll give you a moment, he squeaked, backing away quickly. Greg laughed. Kid's nervous. Probably knows he's serving a VP of sales. Intimidating, right? He looked at me. That's what power looks like, Arthur. People get nervous around you. I suppose so, I said quietly. Or maybe he's just new. So, Dad, Emily said, trying to change the subject. Have you been working on your garden? You said the roses were blooming. She was trying so hard to keep the peace. I smiled at her warmly. Yes, they are beautiful this year. The yellow ones specifically. I spend a few hours every morning just pruning them. Greg groaned loudly, interrupting us. Roses. Gardening. God, Arthur, listen to yourself. You're wasting away. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. You have all this free time. You could be doing something productive. Consulting. Investing. Something to bring in some cash. I have enough for my needs, I replied calmly. Enough. Greg scoffed. You live in a shoebox. You drive a wreck. You wear. He gestured vaguely at my chest. That. You look like you just walked out of a thrift store donation bin. It's embarrassing for Emily, you know. Having a father who looks like a beggar. Emily flushed red. Greg, stop it. He looks fine. He looks useless, Greg stated, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. He looks like he's given up on life. The insult hung in the air like smoke. Useless. It wasn't the first time. He had implied it, but it was the first time he had said it so directly. I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. I wanted to see how far he would. I didn't realize my value was determined by my wardrobe, Greg, I said. It's not just the wardrobe, Arthur. It's the mindset, Greg preached, looking delighted to be lecturing me. It's the lack of ambition. You're content with nothing. How can you look your daughter in the eye knowing you can't provide for her if she needed it? We don't need his money, Greg, Emily snapped. We have plenty. That's not the point. Greg argued. The point is he's a burden waiting to happen. In 5 years, 10 years, who's going to pay for his medical bills? Who's going to pay for his nursing home? He's a liability, Emily. And he sits there gardening while I bust my back making deals. He looked at me with pure contempt. You're a drain on society, Arthur. You take up space and contribute zero. I took a sip of my water. It was cool and crisp. I think you might be surprised at what I can contribute, I said softly. The waiter returned, looking even more nervous than before. Are you ready to order? He asked, avoiding eye contact with me. We are, Greg announced. I'll have the Wagyu ribeye. Rare. And I want truffle shavings on top. Don't be stingy. He pointed to Emily. She'll have the salmon. Sauce on the side. He didn't even let her speak. Then he pointed a fork at me. And for the old man, bring him the roasted chicken. It's the cheapest thing on the entree list, right? The waiter hesitated. The chicken is excellent, sir, but perhaps the gentleman would like to choose for himself? Greg slammed his hand on the table. I'm paying the bill, so I choose what he eats. He's not used to this kind of food anyway. Steak would be wasted on him. Bring him the chicken. The waiter looked at me, his face pale. Very well, sir, he whispered. I nodded at him. The chicken is fine, I said. Thank you. As the waiter walked away, Greg leaned back, looking satisfied. See? I'm doing you a favor. Chicken is easier to chew. At your age, you have to be careful. The appetizers arrived, a tower of seafood that Greg had ordered for the table without asking us. Oysters, lobster tails, shrimp the size of my fist. Greg dove in, eating with gusto, grease shining on his chin. Eat up, Arthur, he mumbled with his mouth full. You probably only see shrimp this size on the Discovery Channel. I picked up a small fork and took a single oyster. It was fresh, briny, perfect. I knew the supplier. He delivered every morning at 4 a.m. from the coast. So, Greg, I said, wiping my mouth, how is business? You mentioned a promotion? Greg puffed up his chest. Finally taking an interest? Yes, I was promoted to senior director last week. Big bump in salary. Huge bonus structure. He pointed a shrimp tail at me. That's how you measure success, Arthur. Growth. I'm building an empire. What did you ever build? A garden shed? I looked him in the eye. I built a few things in my time. A family. A home. Greg rolled his eyes. Sentimental garbage. That doesn't pay the bills. That doesn't get you a table at Obsidian. The main courses arrived. The smell of the Wagyu steak was intoxicating, rich and meaty. My chicken was beautifully plated, golden brown with roasted vegetables. Greg cut into his steak, the red juice flowing onto the plate. Now this, he said, chewing loudly, is what success tastes like. You see the marbling? You can't get this at the supermarket. He looked at my plate. How's the bird? Dry. It's delicious, I said. Perfectly cooked. Good, Greg said. Enjoy it. Because this is a one-time thing. I'm not making a habit of dragging you to 5-star restaurants. Emily put her fork down. Greg, please. Can we just have a nice dinner? It's my birthday. I'm trying him. Greg threw his hands up. But look at him. He sits there judging me. I haven't said a word about you, Greg, I pointed out. Your silence is judging. Greg countered. You think you're so noble with your simple life. It's not noble, Arthur. It's lazy. You're a lazy old man who leeched off his wife and now you're waiting to leech off your daughter. That struck a nerve. My wife, Martha, had been the love of my life. We had built everything together. When she died, a part of me went with her. To hear him speak her name, to imply I used her, my hands balled into fists under the table. You don't talk about Martha, I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. The table went silent. Greg looked surprised for a second, then he laughed. Oh, did I hit a sore spot? The truth hurts, doesn't it? Greg, stop, Emily said, her voice trembling. Dad worked hard his whole life. Mom loved him. Mom loved a loser, Greg spat. And I'm just trying to make sure you don't end up supporting him for the next 20 years. He took a long swig of his wine. I'm doing this for us, Emily. Someone has to tell him the truth. He's useless. He brings nothing to the table. Literally. He gestured to the bill that would eventually come. I pay for the food. I pay for the wine. He just consumes. I stood up. I needed a moment. If I stayed seated, I was going to say something I couldn't take back, or worse, I was going to reveal my hand too early. I need to use the restroom, I said stiffly. Greg waved his hand dismissively. Go ahead. Try not to get lost on the way back. I walked away from the table, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt the eyes of the other diners on me. They had heard the raised voices. They were looking at the old man in the shabby coat being scolded by the rich young suit. I walked down the hallway toward the back of the restaurant. The restroom was to the right, but the kitchen was to the left. I paused. The double doors to the kitchen swung open, and a man in a sharp black suit stepped out. It was Pierre, the general manager. He was looking down at a tablet, frowning. When he looked up and saw me, he froze. His eyes went wide, and he immediately straightened his posture, snapping his heels together. "Monsieur Blackwood," he gasped. "We did not know you were coming. I would have prepared the private room." I held up a finger to my lips. "Quietly, Pierre," I whispered. Pierre looked panicked. He looked at my coat, then at my face. "Sir, is everything all right? Why are you dressed like this? And why are you sitting in the main dining room?" Pierre had been managing my restaurants for 10 years. He knew me as the man who signed the checks, the man who owned the entire restaurant group, which included Obsidian and 12 other high-end spots in the city. "I'm having dinner with my daughter and her husband," I explained softly. "I'm observing." Pierre's face darkened. "Observing?" "The waiter, James, he told me the man at table 4 is difficult. He is being rude to you." "He's being honest, Pierre. Or at least, honest about what he thinks of me." I looked back down the hallway. "Let it play out. Tell the staff to treat me like a stranger. No special treatment. Do you understand?" Pierre nodded vigorously. "Of course, monsieur. But, are you sure? The chef would want to say hello." "Not tonight," I said. "Just bring the bill when he asks for it. And bring the card terminal yourself." I walked back to the table. Greg was finishing his steak, and Emily was staring out the window, looking like she wanted to cry. When I sat down, Greg didn't even look up. "Took you long enough," he muttered. "I was just telling Emily that we should look into some state-funded homes for you. Get you on a waiting list. Early." Emily turned to me, tears in her eyes. "Dad, I didn't agree to that." "Ignore him." "It's practical, Emily." Greg insisted. "Why should we pay for private care when he has contributed nothing to the economy? Let the state take care of him." He looked at me. "You'd like that, wouldn't you, Arthur? Free room and board. Right up your alley." I picked up my fork and took a bite of the vegetables. They were cold now. "I plan to stay in my own home, Greg," I said. "But thank you for your concern." "Concern?" Greg laughed. "It's not concern. It's damage control." The waiter cleared the plates. Greg ordered dessert, a gold leaf chocolate cake that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. He also ordered another bottle of wine. He was drunk now, his face flushed, his arrogance amplified by the alcohol. "You know," Greg slurred slightly, pointing his spoon at me, "I bet you've never even seen a $100 bill. Like, really looked at one." "I've seen them," I said. "They're just paper, Greg. Just paper." He threw his head back and laughed. "That is the talk of a poor man. Money is power. Money is freedom. Money is the only thing that matters in this world." He leaned in close. "And you have none. That's why you're nothing." Emily stood up. "That's enough. I'm leaving." Greg grabbed her wrist. "Sit down. We haven't paid. We're celebrating your birthday, remember? Don't ruin it because your dad is sensitive." Emily sat back down, defeated. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. "Check!" Greg yelled across the room, snapping his fingers at the waiter. I saw Pierre, the manager, watching from the shadows near the bar. He nodded at the waiter. The waiter brought the black leather folder and placed it gently on the table. Greg grabbed it with a flourish. He opened it, looked at the total, and whistled. $750, he announced. "Not bad for a Tuesday." He looked at me. "That's probably 3 months of your pension, right, Arthur?" He reached into his wallet and pulled out a shiny platinum credit card. He tossed it onto the bill like he was dealing a winning hand of poker. "Put it on the plastic," he said to the waiter. The waiter took the folder and the card and walked away. Greg leaned back, looking like the king of the world. "See, Arthur? That's how it's done. One swipe. No stress." 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Greg was starting to look annoyed. "What's taking so long?" he grumbled. Probably admiring the card. Finally, the waiter returned. He didn't look nervous anymore. He looked awkward. He placed the folder back on the table. "I'm sorry, sir," he said softly. "The card was declined." Greg's eyes nearly popped out of his head. What? He snatched the folder. That's impossible. It's a platinum card. There's no limit. The machine said, declined, sir, the waiter repeated. Greg's face turned a shade of crimson. It's your machine. It's broken. Run it again. We tried 3 times, sir, the waiter said. Do you have another form of payment? Greg laughed nervously. This is ridiculous. I just paid for a flight to Paris yesterday. The bank probably flagged it for fraud because the bill is so high. Greg pulled out a second card. A gold one this time. Use this. And tell your manager to fix his machine. The waiter took the card and walked away. Greg looked at us, forcing a smile. Banks, right? They see a big spender and they panic. It's a security measure. Happens to me all the time. I stayed silent. I knew exactly what was happening. I watched the waiter walk over to the terminal where Pierre was standing. Pierre whispered something to the waiter. The waiter nodded. They came back 2 minutes later. The waiter placed the folder down again. I'm terribly sorry, sir. This one was declined as well. Insufficient funds. The silence at the table was heavy. Greg looked like he had been slapped. Insufficient funds? That card has a $20,000 limit. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the bank. This is a mistake. He dialed furiously, but his hands were shaking. Dad, Emily whispered, looking terrified. Do you have any money? I left my purse in the car. I shook my head. I didn't bring my wallet, sweetie. I thought Greg was treating us. Greg slammed his phone down. No signal. This place is a dungeon. He looked at me, sweat forming on his forehead. The arrogance was melting away, replaced by pure panic. He had eaten $700 worth of food and had no way to pay for it. He looked at me with desperation, then anger. This is your fault, he hissed. My fault? I raised an eyebrow. Your bad luck. I bring you here and everything goes wrong. He looked around the room. People were starting to stare. The manager, Pierre, was walking toward our table. He looked stern. Is there a problem, sir? Pierre asked, his voice cold. Your machines are broken. Greg shouted, standing up. I have money. I am a senior director. Sir, our machines are working perfectly, Pierre said smoothly. All other transactions are going through. If you cannot pay, we will have to call the police. Theft of services is a serious crime. Greg paled. Police? No. Look, I can go to an ATM. I can. We do not allow customers to leave without settling the bill, Pierre said. Perhaps your guest can pay. Pierre looked at me. Greg laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. He doesn't have $10, let alone $700. He's useless. He's a broke old man. Greg pointed a shaking finger at me. He's the one you should arrest. He ate the food too. I slowly wiped my mouth with the napkin and placed it on the table. Sit down, Greg, I said. My voice was calm, authoritative. It wasn't the voice of a retired gardener. It was the voice of a man who ran an empire. Greg stared at me, confused by the change in my tone. What? I said sit down. I looked at Pierre. Pierre, bring the terminal here, please. Pierre bowed slightly. Yes, sir. He signaled the waiter, who brought the wireless card machine instantly. Greg looked back and forth between us. What are you doing? You can't pay this. I reached into the inner pocket of my frayed coat. I pulled out a slim, metal card case. I opened it and slid out a heavy, black card made of anodized titanium. It had no numbers on it, just a name etched in silver, Arthur Blackwood. Greg's eyes widened. He knew what that card was. It was invitation only. It was for the ultra-wealthy. Where did you get that? Greg whispered. Did you steal that? I ignored him. I took the terminal from the waiter. I didn't swipe the card. I just held it up. Pierre stepped forward. There is no need for the card, Monsieur Blackwood, Pierre said, his voice ringing clear in the silent dining room. The house is yours. Literally. I looked at Pierre. No, Pierre. Charge the full amount. I want a record of this meal. I tapped the card against the machine. It beeped instantly. Approved. I handed the terminal back. Add a 30% tip for the staff, I said. They had to deal with a very difficult customer tonight. Greg sank into his chair. He looked like he was having a stroke. Monsieur Blackwood, he stammered. You know the manager? Pierre turned to Greg, his face a mask of professional disdain. Sir, Monsieur Blackwood does not just know the manager. Monsieur Blackwood owns this restaurant. The color drained from Greg's face so completely he looked like a sheet of paper. He owns it? He owns the building, Pierre continued, enjoying this immensely. He owns the Obsidian Group. He owns the winery that produced the vintage you just drank. And he owns the farm that raised the beef you just ate. Emily gasped. Dad? Is that true? I looked at my daughter. Yes, sweetie. When I sold the tech company in the 90s, I invested in real estate and hospitality. I kept it quiet because I wanted a simple life. I wanted people to like me for me, not my bank account. I turned my gaze to Greg. He was trembling. The useless, old man was suddenly the most powerful person in the room. I didn't know, Greg stuttered. Arthur, I was just joking. You know that, right? Just guy talk. You called me useless, I said, my voice cutting like a knife. You called me a leech. You said I contribute nothing. I stood up, buttoning my old coat. I employ 400 people in this city alone, Greg. I support 3 charities. I built this empire with my own hands while you were still in diapers. I leaned down close to his face. And the reason I dress like this? The reason I drive an old car? It's a test. A test to see who treats people with dignity, regardless of what they have. I paused. You failed. Greg opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was destroyed. His vanity, his pride, his arrogance, it was all shattered in seconds. Come on, Emily, I said, holding out my hand to my daughter. I think we're done here. Let's go get some ice cream. My treat. Emily looked at Greg, who was slumped in his chair, a broken man staring at an empty wine glass. She hesitated for a second, then stood up and took my hand. Okay, Dad. We walked out of the restaurant together. Pierre held the door open for us, bowing deeply. Good night, Monsieur Blackwood. Good night, Pierre, I said. Excellent service as always. As we stepped out into the cool night air, the wind didn't feel cold anymore. I looked back through the window. Greg was still sitting there, alone at the table, surrounded by expensive plates he couldn't pay for, in a restaurant owned by the man he called useless. I squeezed Emily's hand. You know, I said, I really do like that old garden shed. Emily laughed, resting her head on my shoulder. I know, Dit. I know. The silence in the taxi was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Emily stared out the window at the passing city lights, her hands still gripping mine. I can't believe it, she finally whispered, turning to look at me. All these years, the gardening, the old sweaters, the coupons. You own L'Obsidienne? And the others? I nodded slowly. I own the group, Emily. And the buildings they sit in. And a few other things. She shook her head, a bewildered smile forming. Why didn't you tell me? I was so worried about you. I thought you were barely scraping by. I wanted you to build your own life, I said gently. I wanted you to find a partner who loved you, not for a potential inheritance. And I wanted to live simply. Wealth changes people, sweetheart. It makes them suspicious. It makes them entitled. I squeezed her hand. I saw what it did to some of my friends. I didn't want that for us. She looked down at her wedding ring, twisting it nervously. Well, she murmured, it certainly revealed who Greg really is. What are you going to do about him? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I didn't want to push her. She was smart. She just needed to see the truth clearly. I don't know, she admitted, her voice trembling. He was so cruel tonight. It wasn't just the money, Dad. It was the way he looked at you. Like you were dirt. And the way he treated the waiter. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I think I've been making excuses for him for a long time. Saying he's just stressed or ambitious. But tonight, she trailed off. Tonight was just mean. He showed you his character, I said softly. When people think they have power over someone, that's when you see who they really are. He thought I was weak, so he bullied me. He thought the waiter was beneath him, so he abused him. I looked her in the eye. You deserve someone who treats the janitor with the same respect as the CEO. Emily nodded, sniffing. I know. I feel so stupid. You're not stupid, I assured her. You're hopeful. There's a difference. The taxi pulled up to her apartment building. It was a nice place, but nothing extravagant. Greg had always complained it wasn't in a prestige neighborhood. Do you want to come up? She asked. I can make some tea. Real tea, not the $80 kind. I smiled. I'd love that. We walked into the lobby, and the doorman, an older gentleman named Frank, tipped his hat. Evening, Ms. Miller. Evening, sir. I nodded back. Good evening, Frank. As we waited for the elevator, Emily's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and frowned. It's Greg, she said. He's texting me. Where are you? Come back. We need to talk about the bill. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. He's not worried about me leaving. He's worried about the bill. She typed a quick reply and shoved the phone back into her purse. I told him to figure it out. He's a senior director, after all. The elevator doors opened, and for the first time all night, Emily looked like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. We sat in her kitchen, drinking chamomile tea from chipped mugs. It was infinitely better than the crystal glasses at the restaurant. So, Emily said, blowing on her tea. What happens now? With the restaurant? With Greg? I took a sip. The restaurant will ban him, of course. Pierre has strict instructions about abusive customers. As for the bill, well, I suspect Pierre will make him wash dishes if he can't pay. We both chuckled at the image. But seriously, Dad, she said, her face growing serious again. I can't go back to him. Not after this. It's not just tonight. It's everything. The comments about my friends, the way he controls the finances, the way he talks about your failure of a life. She looked around the small kitchen. I think I need to stay with you for a while. Is that okay? Is there room in the shoebox? I smiled, my heart swelling. There's always room for you, Emily. The guest room is ready. And the garden needs a second pair of hands. The next morning, I was back in my garden, pruning the yellow roses. The sun was warm on my back, and the air smelled of damp earth and blooming flowers. My old coat was hanging on the fence post. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, not a taxi this time, but my personal driver, Thomas. He stepped out, holding a garment bag. Good morning, Mr. Blackwood, Thomas said. I brought the suit for the board meeting. Thank you, Thomas, I said, clipping a dead leaf. Just leave it on the porch. Emily walked out of the house, holding 2 cups of coffee. She was wearing one of my old flannel shirts, looking more relaxed than I had seen her in years. Who was that? She asked, handing me a mug. Just Thomas, I said, dropping off some work clothes. She looked at the garment bag, then at me and smiled. You know, Dad, she said, looking out at the rows of vibrant roses. Greg was right about one thing. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what was that? She leaned her head on my shoulder. You really are good at growing things. I put my arm around her. The best things, I agreed. The best things,